submitted the abstract many months ago for this talk, I didn't realize that I would be doing a Templeton talk for the general audience, so I had to modify the talk to make it appropriate for the audience. So what you have seen in the program will be different than what I'll be speaking about today. I will at the very end talk about some of the empirical research, and I will actually make that available to you as a reference list if you are interested in emailing me. But the topic of my talk today is spirituality, meaning, and 12-step recovery. Again, this is my email, and I'll give it to you again if something I say is of interest to you. This is the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that you might be familiar with. I'll be talking a lot about it today. In the big book, there's the AA worldview, which sees the root of the problem of alcoholism and its solution as both being spiritual. This is the theme of my talk, and I'm just giving you a little preview so you know where we'll be going. So the problem and the solution are thought to be both spiritual in nature. AA sees the problem of addiction as being spiritual in nature. The inability to drink in moderation and the inability to live a satisfying life are both observable symptoms caused by a deeper-rooted spiritual disease. You see I have a hyphen here, dis-ease. The underlying spiritual disease involves the absence of a sense of sacred meaning. AA also sees the solution to addiction as being spiritual in nature. Spiritual healing is needed to arrest, but not cure, the disease. And I hope that I am representing accurately the AA worldview. So let's talk briefly about the first half of the equation, the problem, and then later we'll talk about the second half, which is the solution. So first, the etiology of the problem, the cause of the problem. Universal human motives. This is taken from Crumbaugh, Wood, and Wood, 1980, a book called Logotherapy, New Help for Problem Drinkers. Highly recommend it for anybody who is interested in this area. Crumbaugh developed the Purpose in Life questionnaire, and the book identifies a number of universal motives that energize and direct human behavior. For example, the need for pleasure. You're familiar with Freud's pleasure principle, and he believed that problems in living were derived from excessive, misguided, ineffective efforts to satisfy this need for pleasure. It's also the need for power or mastery. A second force that energizes and directs human behavior. Frankl would say power-seeking behavior typifies the will to power. Adler proposed problems in living were derived from excessive, misguided, and ineffective efforts to satisfy this need. For example, conflicts, interpersonal conflicts, social conflicts, inferiority complex, etc. Finally, the need for meaning and purpose in life. Frankl suggests this is the most important of the motives that energize and direct human behavior. Frankl suggested purpose-seeking thoughts and purpose-seeking behaviors typify the will to meaning. Problems in living, such as substance abuse, are expressions of misguided and ineffective efforts to satisfy this need. Substance abuse problems are symptomatic of an underlying existential vacuum or neurogenic neurosis. A little about the existential vacuum, the EV. When we don't perceive a why for our life, we are more easily tired from the struggle of the how of life. Existential vacuum suggests subjective feelings of emptiness, void, boredom, and a sense that something is missing, feeling incomplete. Lacking a cause, calling, or important goal in life deprives a person of a sense of personal identity. So people with an existential vacuum don't see themselves reflected in the eyes of others as being someone. People who lack a why for their life feel alienated from the world, from others, and from themselves. This is pretty well consistent with what the AA Big Book would say. So to summarize, problems in living are caused by A, frustration of the need to perceive meaning, or B, the inauthentic satisfaction of the meaning. And I'll talk later about how alcohol consumption and the sense of euphoria that comes from inebriation as inauthentic satisfaction of this need. Ultimate meaning and the purpose in the universe. Frankl and Crumbaugh both believe it's important that people struggle successfully with the issue of incomprehensibility of the existence of the universe, life, and human awareness. Most logotherapists believe alcoholics should have faith there is ultimate meaning and that it can be perceived. And Frankl and Crumbaugh both agree the first axiom in logotherapy is the thirst for meaning and purpose in human life is a spiritual thirst, although there is non-spiritual sense to the term meaning as well. So the assumption is that the alcoholic suffers from an existential vacuum. Buber's 1965 a description of the human condition. This condition is characterized by the union of cosmic homelessness. I just love this term. Cosmic homelessness, dread of the universe, dread of life, resulting in existential condition of solitude. The person feels exposed by nature as an unwanted child feels exposed. A metaphor of the unwanted child who feels exposed, I think, is very powerful imagery. Nihilism, an oppressive worldview, consists of acceptance of the worthlessness, futility, nothingness, and emptiness of existence. Nihilism causes alcoholics to feel troubled by a sense that something is missing in life, a sense of isolation, separation, estrangement, alienation, anomy from humanity or God, and ill at ease in the world, a sense of dis-ease, feeling ill at ease in the world, a sense of dis-ease with other people, with the universe, and dis-ease with oneself. So what motivates alcohol consumption in early career drinking? I think probably in later career drinking it has to do with negative affect relief and avoidance, trying to back away. But here, I think in early stage it has to do with seeking something positive as opposed to trying to avoid something negative, which is later career drinking. So intoxication and the will to meaning. Imbibing to achieve intoxication, at least in early stage alcoholic career, might express a striving towards self-transcendence and a yearning for a perceived connection to something majestic, something grand, and something more powerful. I'm sure each of you have probably felt that experience at one time or another, if you don't abstain. Intoxication and the will to meaning. Huxley, 1965, is a famous quote. There is in all of us a desire, sometimes latent, sometimes conscious, passionately expressed, to escape from the prison of our individuality, an urge to self-transcendence. It is to this urge that we owe mystical theology, spiritual exercises, and yoga. To this, too, we owe alcoholism and drug addiction. From page 338. I have these references. If anybody's interested later on, I'll be able to email them to you. So, inebriation and mystical awakening. Here's a quote from William James. The sway of alcohol over mankind is unquestionably due to its power to stimulate the mystical faculties of human nature, usually crushed to earth by cold facts and dry criticisms of the sober hour. Sobriety diminishes, discriminates, and says no. Drunkenness expands, unites, and says yes. It is, in fact, the great exciter of the yes function in man. It makes him, for the moment, one with the truth. Not through mere perversity do men run after it. It is part of the deeper mystery and tragedy of life. So much promise there, and it turns out to be so destructive. The main idea is that people use alcohol as a shortcut means of quenching the genuine thirst to transcend the ego and connect to something beyond, which is felt as having sacred meaning. This is the understanding that is communicated more or less in the 12-step program, in the Big Book and the 12 and 12, the two core textbooks. So here's a little bit from Bill's own words. Bill W., the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. 1943, Bill W., co-founder of AA, was quoted as saying that the alcoholic was trying to get his religion out of a bottle when what he really wants is unity with himself and unity with God and others. So this is what Bill has said. A little bit about Carl Jung's letters to Bill W. Carl Jung, certainly with this audience, needs no introduction. Jung became instrumental in strengthening Bill W.'s understanding of the spiritual causes and cure, quote-unquote, of alcoholism. Jung suggested an alcoholic's craving for alcohol was equivalent at a low level of the spiritual thirst of our being for wholeness, expressed in medieval language, the union with God. And this was reproduced in AA magazine called The Grapevine, which is for the members themselves. It's a AA trade magazine. It's like the Reader's Digest of AA. A little bit more about Carl Jung's words. Jung continued to say to Bill in his letter, you see alcohol in Latin is spiritus, and you use the same word for the highest religious experience as well as the most depraving poison, i.e. alcohol. The helpful formula, therefore, is spiritus contra spiritum. Now, this is an ancient epithet with various interpretations. Being connected to one causes disconnection to the other, is the general idea. Being connected to alcohol causes disconnection to genuine spirituality. Contra means against. Thus, authentic spirituality works against chemically induced spirituality. This is the helpful formula, spiritus contra spiritum. Authentic spirituality works against chemically induced spirituality, and vice versa. Now, the AA program is based on spiritus contra spiritum, and I've seen a recent book by Jeff Sandoz with the title, on Alcoholics Anonymous, with the title Spiritus contra spiritum. In AA, alcohol abuse is seen as a barrier to God consciousness. Conversely, God consciousness is seen as a barrier to alcohol abuse. And the core AA belief is that chronic awareness of sacred presence ensures chronic abstinence. It does a little more than cause people to abstain. It causes a profound improvement in the quality of life as well. So it's not just about not drinking. It's about improving the quality of life and living a virtuous life. Now, authentic AA emphasizes spirituality. The planned program of recovery features spiritual growth, but the fellowship may or may not. Planned program of recovery being the 12 steps as operationalized in the first 164 pages of the Big Book. The planned program of recovery is manualized in the Big Book and the 12 and 12. This is it's been revised, but I'm referring here to the 1976 version of the book called Alcoholics Anonymous. This is the nickname given. They call it the Big Book. And the 12 and 12 is the 12 steps and the 12 traditions. So these are nicknames, short forms for those two core textbooks. That is the planned program of recovery, but not everybody in the fellowship adheres to this. In fact, there's a problem with lack of compliance and lack of adherence. The fellowship consists, again, of the network of people who attend AA meetings. And originally, back in the late 1930s and the 40s and the 50s, the purpose of the fellowship was to support the planned program of recovery. It's still the purpose now, but back then they used to actually adhere to this philosophy, whereas today there's this bifurcation where a lot of people in AA have never looked at the Big Book or the 12 and 12. They have no plans of developing a relationship with the God of their understanding. So in contemporary AA, there is often a disconnect, and I think of a pocket of secular AAs and a pocket of spiritual AAs. The use of spiritual terms in the AA Big Book is certainly obvious. The term spiritual is used 145 times in the 1976 version. The term God is used 277 times. I didn't count them out, but I have a concordance. So the term creator is used 12 times. The term higher power is used 18 times. There's also liberal use of other terms for transcendent divine being. The term he, capitalized him, his, himself is used 107 times. Other terms include Father of Light, Spirit of the Universe, Creator is also used a lot. Some spiritual quotes from the AA Big Book. Here on page, twice it says a spiritual remedy, referring to the 12 steps. What is it, a spiritual remedy? A simple kit of spiritual tools. Again, this refers to the planned program of recovery, not the fellowship, but the planned program of recovery, steps 1, step 2, step 3, etc., etc. The necessity of a spiritual experience. Again, this is emphasized. It's on page 27. The spiritual answer. So we have a problem, and we have a solution or an answer. An illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. This is a belief of the AA Big Book. We have written a book which we believe to be spiritual. We have some more quotes. We don't have time to go through them. Members are asked to make use of spiritual principles that grow along spiritual lines. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically, and the hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience. Spiritual life is not a theory, we have to live it. This is pragmatic spirituality, we have to live it. It's not about beliefs, it's about enacting one's beliefs and values, embodying them. Now, a little bit about the dry drunk syndrome and the existential vacuum. There is a white-knuckle sobriety which may reflect a lack of resolution of the existential vacuum. A literature emphasizes the difference between physical abstinence on the one side and sobriety on the other, and changing the ism in alcoholism is important. Ism stands for I, self, me. That's what needs to be changed. Now, Larson has published a book in '85 called Stage 2 Recovery, Life Beyond Addiction. Stage 1 is where you're trying to get sober and disconnect from alcohol. Stage 2 is where you're trying to become sober, which is improving the quality of life and living a virtuous life. Also another book in 1983 called The Dry Drunk Syndrome, published by Hazelton. So just to summarize in conclusion, in the next 1 minute, the AA worldview sees the root of the problem of alcoholism and its solution as both being spiritual. So I'm just telling you what it is that I have told you. And what does scientific research show? I have a short bibliography of recent empirical research linking recovery to in AA to spirituality. It's available. You can email me at that address. I had planned originally to give an entire talk on that, but I have the articles right here. These aren't all the articles, but this is the world's strongest literature. There is a lot of literature, and I have called the literature which has the greatest level of scientific merit. There are many, many, many studies, but I have identified what I think is the studies that we can trust the most. And this has all been done within the last 10 years, much of it. And this is the end. Thank you very much.